Welcome to another episode of the brand called You, a podcast and podcast show that brings you leadership lessons, knowledge, experience, and wisdom from thousands of successful individuals from around the world. I'm your host, Ashutosh Garg, and today I'm delighted to welcome a very specialized coach with a niche in coaching jewelry appraisers from Canada, Karen Howard. Karen, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much.
Karen is a business coach for jewelry appraisers. She's been passionate about educating others in the gem world for over 25 years. So, Karen, before we get on to coaching jewelry appraisers, tell me about your own journey in brief and what sparked your interest in jewelry.
Uh, well, love shiny things, of course, don't we all? But my journey was a little bit different than most people. I didn't start out in this industry. I have no family in the industry. I just was looking for a job one day and walked into a local gift jewelry store. I had a background in selling the giftware.
Mm.
And then one day my boss said to me, it was very quiet, and he said, "Oh, come on, I'm going to play with some diamonds. Why don't you join me?"
Okay.
And turned out I had a natural eye for grading diamonds without
Mm.
any knowledge, but just could see the differences quite quickly. And that
Mm.
started my journey. And years later, I became an instructor of gemology for the Canadian Gemological Association, as well as teaching people how to appraise through that association as well.
Mm.
But I also opened my own business as a jewelry appraiser because I wanted to be at home with my kids when they were growing up.
Mm.
And for 22 years, I ran a business called KC Appraisals
Mhm.
in Guelph. Um, but the interesting thing of when I was teaching, I was doing both at one time where I was teaching appraising and I was doing appraising. And my students kept wanting they were asking me questions about business. And so I give them tips and tricks and whatever these little things. Oh, would you mentor me? Would you coach me? Would you? And I didn't have time at that point. And so when I decided to step back from appraising, I thought now I can help the ones coming up with the business
Mm.
aspect.
What an amazing journey. Thank you. But I love the way you so simply said that your boss said, "Come and let's play with diamonds." But then you seem to have transitioned so easily from retail sales into gemology. What were some of the early challenges you faced as a gemologist?
As a gemologist, the earliest challenge was not being able to go to class to learn gemology, but having to do it online.
Okay.
And back then, there was no such thing as it wasn't done by Zoom calls, etc. It was, I did my work. I sent I had a book. I read the book. I sent
Mm.
it through email. To start with, actually, it was snail mail. There wasn't even email back then.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
I'm dating myself. Um,
absolutely.
so the challenge was actually learning the language to start with
Mm.
because some of the words are astronomically long,
Mm.
um, and just learning to understand it. But by just keeping going to when I could to meetings, etc. Sorry, excuse me. There, I was able to grasp some of the concepts I hadn't totally grasped on
Mm.
my own
Mm.
by not being afraid to ask questions.
Mm.
I think that was the biggest hurdle we all get over is the fact that we don't want to admit we don't know something.
Mm.
But once you get past that, it's amazing how friendly and helpful most people are if they're in the industry that you're in. So I think that was my biggest hurdle as a gemologist was just getting past the point of saying, I don't know, like
Mm.
I read it, but I don't understand that. Can you
Mm.
tell
Mm.
me more? Can you explain it more?
Mm.
Even I remember even later in my career, sitting in between two gemologists that were very much top of the industry, just at a casual dinner, and they're talking about ethics and ethical mining and different places they've been, and I'm just sitting there and I'm just sitting back enjoying. And one I knew really well, and the other one I just met when he sat down for dinner. And the one that sat down for dinner, the gentleman that sat down for dinner said, "We're being very rude to Karen. She's
Mm.
like, we're
Mm.
talking over top of her." And I said, "No, no, no, please continue because I'm learning." And
Mm.
and so being open to that, I think, is
How wonderful.
always
How
important.
wonderful. What an amazing journey and experience. Thank you. But one of the other things that is there when it comes to gemstones and jewelry, and I see this whenever my wife wants to buy something, is that she always goes back to the same jeweler because she trusts that company or the individual. How did you build trust and credibility?
By being open,
Mhm.
by being very upfront with my clients
Mhm.
when I met them, the interesting thing about my career as an appraiser is I never advertised.
Mhm.
I never paid for an advertisement in 22 years. It
Mhm.
was by word of mouth, and social media. The word of mouth was my biggest way of getting clients.
Mhm.
And so by having one client refer another client to me, they had to have trusted me to start with. And it was all in the way they were treated when they walked in
Mhm.
my door or when they sent me that first email or phoned me that first time.
Mhm.
Um, by just keeping honest and saying, if I had to do more research on something, being open to saying, I'm sorry, my timeline has changed,
Mhm.
you
Wow.
know.
Wow. And that is probably the best way to build credibility. Karen, let's now talk about your new avatar as a business coach for jewelry appraisers. What gap in the industry do you aim to fill as a jewelry appraisers coach? And what are some of the challenges jewelry appraisers need to be coached in?
The gap I'm looking to fill is the one of the business end of especially for the independent. I'm really gearing towards the independent appraiser. In Canada, we have quite a few of them.
Mhm.
Um, and in the States, if I go to the UK, no, they work for stores. They're not as independent.
Mm,
But for an independent appraiser, the knowledge or the information that they're given to become an appraiser lacks the business end.
mm,
And so unless they have that from somewhere else, opening up their own business and how to run it and how to work it, how to contact clients, who are their clients,
mm,
um, is there's a total gap there. And so that's where my business background, because I actually my college education was in business.
mm,
So I'm trying to fill that gap for them so that by the time they go to open their business, they have someone that can help them through their first
mm,
year of business. And instead of struggling as much, hopefully by the end of the first year, they will be a successful business at that
mm,
point.
mm. Thank you. Um, why is gem identification such a critical skill for appraisers?
Well, the easy answer is if you don't know what the gem is, how do you value it?
Right.
And unfortunately, in today's market, there is so many um, how do I want to word this? There are so many people out there trying to make something look like it isn't,
Mm,
trying to replicate it into something else.
yeah.
And it's why I always say you have to keep going in education. You never stop.
Mm,
And that if you've misidentified it, you've misvalued it, it's costing your client that could cost your client thousands and thousands of
mm,
dollars.
mm,
It could also cost the insurance company down the road, if that's the route they're going, thousands and thousands. If you're working for a jewelry store, again,
mm,
without the gem identification, you shouldn't be appraising
mm.
jewelry.
Yeah. And in your opinion, what are some of the common mistakes a lot of appraisers tend to make?
They do the shortcut of not cleaning.
Hmm.
You cannot identify a dirty gem. And that's one thing I found with clients because I did a lot of my work in front of my clients. I was quite comfortable them sitting there asking questions while I was working. But they didn't want they didn't want you in there cleaning their gems. And I'm going, but you don't want me to appraising the dirt that's on your gem. You want me to appraise the gem.
Hmm.
And unfortunately, that's the one big thing I see is that they just bypass that and think they can look through the dirt.
Hmm. Very interesting. And of course, then there's this whole, I mean, I'm not a jewelry person at all, but one has seen lots of movies. And there's this whole thing of the blood diamonds. Isn't that also a big problem when it comes to identification?
No, because
No.
by the time we get to it as an identification, it should have already gone through all the
Ah,
processes
I
that are
see.
in place to eliminate that.
Okay.
Now, me being Canadian, the Canadian diamond, that eliminated a lot of that
Yeah,
because we know where our diamonds come from.
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. My next question, Karen, is how do you coach people to handle uncertainty in identification?
To acknowledge it,
Hmm.
to admit that you can't know everything,
Correct.
to create a group around you to of people that are more knowledgeable or
Hmm.
that you trust their knowledge. They may be in a bigger market than you, and so they see more pieces to identify. To be part of associations where you can post a question and say, "This is what I'm looking at. Any ideas?"
Hmm.
You cannot survive as an independent appraiser without that.
Hmm. Okay. You spoke a little bit about ethics and how you built your credibility based on very strong ethics. What role does ethics play when it comes to appraising jewelry for some of your clients?
Yeah. Ethics is one of those things yeah, I have a really strong ethic. And so the only thing I could tell my clients is you have to figure out what your ethic is.
Hmm.
In this industry, you should be
Squeaky clean.
squeaky clean. You should draw your line and never cross it.
Absolutely.
Your clients are going to ask you to cross it at times, and you
Hmm.
have to be willing to say, no, I don't
Hmm.
need you as a client if that's what you want me to do,
Hmm.
which I have done in my past.
Hmm.
Um, that is where I draw the line, but I can't be in anybody else's head. I
Hmm.
can only tell them
Yeah,
how I think the business should be.
absolutely. Absolutely. And what are your thoughts on conflict of interest when it comes to appraisals? And I'm sure this must be coming up many times. How should appraisers handle pressure from clients or dealers?
If there's a conflict of interest, just say that you have a conflict of interest. Sometimes it may be as simple as writing a letter to
Mm,
cover letter with the appraisal to say there is a conflict of interest, but you have been instructed to do it anyway. Um, and just acknowledge that in the documentation you give.
mm,
Um, Even if they get rid of that letter, that's part of your copy of the appraisal you've given.
mm,
Uh, I've had it I only came across it once in my career, so I never really had an issue with it. Um, I've had two areas where I had both parties of a divorce come to me, and I knew that the second person that came in, he was testing me to see whether I was good because
mm,
he was going to contest his wife's. The other aspect of it is because of privacy issues in my country, I can't tell him I've already done his wife. Like I can't acknowledge that fact. Um, and I can't acknowledge how I got to anything. There's privacy.
mm,
So I just did both, but stated that I felt a bit of conflict, but the husband, that had
mm,
insisted.
mm,
The
mm,
other one was for me, it wasn't necessarily a conflict of interest, but it was where I couldn't see the item because they were in the Northwest Territories of Canada and I'm
mm,
in the very southern tip of
mm,
Canada.
mm,
And so I had to get the gentleman to go to the local RCMP and do an affidavit about because it was a redo for me, just stating under the affidavit that nothing had been changed since I'd seen it.
mm,
So there are ways of working around that, but it's whatever works the best.
mm.
Sometimes
You-
if it was a major conflict of interest, I would probably just,
mm,
I'm not doing it
yeah, yeah. But
and
as a
recommend someone else.
as a coach, um, would you be able to share, without any names, of course,
Mhm.
one or two other types of conflicts that are faced by people?
It could be there's a conflict of interest if especially if you're working for a jewelry store, and that's where being an independent, I didn't run into it very often. But if you're working for a jewelry store and you're being paid by them to
Mm,
do the appraisal, you end up with conflict of interest if you're appraising their items
mm,
for their client.
mm,
In that case, it's part of your job because you are working for them. So the hardest part there would be having not having them tell you what the dollar value would be.
mm,
When I was working with stores, I didn't have that because I was doing contractual where I would just come in every 6 weeks or so,
mm,
do the valuations, and but it was still my business that was
mm.
doing it. It wasn't theirs.
Thank you. How do you teach appraisers to remain objective when it comes to a challenging situation?
I don't think you can teach anyone to remain objective. They have to be able to remain objective themselves.
Mm,
And sometimes it's hard. You have to pull yourself back and go, okay, I need to just start from the beginning, do my processes that I do,
mm,
and let the my research tell me the answer and not think, and not think about who I'm doing it for or the reason. It's the research that will tell me my answer.
mm.
That's
Okay.
about the only way to stay. But
Mm.
it can be hard, I think,
Yeah,
sometimes.
yeah, yeah. And would you, for my viewers and listeners, be able to share an example where ethical decision making made a difference for your client?
Yeah, actually, having the insurance company when having done some appraisals for someone and then they were stolen, but the insurance company didn't want to pay um, because I was so diligent in how I approach my appraising. I was called as an expert witness, and although I had to sit and wait to be called because it was during Zoom time where we didn't have in-person hearings. Um, the It ended up when they looked at my documentation in court,
Mm.
they didn't need to call me as an expert witness because the insurance company decided to settle. And
Mm.
so my ethics there really helped my client
Mm.
just be able to give them what I'd done and not have to listen to me talk.
Thank you. The next two or three questions, Karen, are about setting up business as an appraiser. So my question is, what are the first steps to setting up a successful appraisal practice?
Um, to get the knowledge, to get the education, if you don't have that, don't even think about setting up your business.
Mm.
And that means being a gemologist, having done a jewelry valuation science course, and having done your diamond grading. Those are the three main educations you need before you start. Once you're there, having the equipment, which you should have been getting as you were going through those courses bit by bit. If you were thinking about setting up, because all of this is very expensive to do.
Mm.
And then it's figuring out the location that you want to be. And that can play a big role in who you're going to attract as a client. Um, so sometimes even knowing what client you want to attract
Mm.
is important before you set up. Of course, having all, your accountant, your lawyer, and all that stuff set up
Yeah.
um, ahead of time is a
Mm.
given,
Mm.
or should be, but not always for some people. And then it is just a matter of like any other business at that
Mm.
point,
Yeah.
is getting the things and just starting.
Mm. Mm. As you were talking, I was thinking I should have asked you this question sometime as we
Mhm.
started. When we talk of gemology, um, how large is the percentage for diamonds versus other gems?
For appraising, it would depend on what type of an appraiser you are. For me, it ended up being when I started my business, because I didn't niche into a certain clientele, it was about 95% of my appraisals were diamonds. And to a certain extent, that is probably true for most jewelry appraisers when they start. Even some people, that's all they'll do is
Mm.
diamond. As I niched into estate appraising because laws here had changed, and I have a passion for older jewelry anyway, so I decided that was a great niche for me to go into. Then I would say it was still about 60% of what I
Mm.
saw was diamonds.
Mm. Amazing. My next question, coming back to business, is what are some of the most overlooked skills needed to run an appraisal business, other than the knowledge, of course?
Yeah. Understanding relations,
Mm.
I think, is an overlooked skill. People don't realize how much they can bring into their business,
Mm.
not just as a jewelry appraiser, but any business.
Mm.
Um, and overlooked skills for a jewelry appraiser is one of them is organization,
Mm.
method, method, methodical thinking. I
Mm.
can't speak,
Mm.
but I know what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Because those are things that are inherent to being able to be a jewelry appraiser. If you
Mm.
are not organized, if you're not methodical in the way you approach things, and people don't think of them as skills, but they
Mm.
really are.
Amazing. Time for two more questions. How
Okay.
can appraisers future-proof their businesses in a changing market?
The best way is by keeping up to date with what is going on in the markets,
Hmm.
what is going on in the world. Just having your story this morning about what was going on in your part of the world, that could affect my business down the road.
Correct.
And and if you don't keep abreast of trends and the events of the world, then you're going to get left behind because you won't have the knowledge you need.
Mm.
In my part of the world right now, of course, we have the tariffs with the US,
Mm.
having the US wanting to make Canada a 51st
Yep.
state, which is
Mm.
not going to work.
Mm.
That's a big thing here. So I'm keeping very close tabs, even though I'm not appraising now,
Mm.
on tariffs that are going back and forth because they change daily as to
Correct.
what they're going to tariff
Yeah.
us for.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
yeah, you just have to be really, really aware of everything
Mm.
going on.
Well said. And my last question for you, Karen. What do you enjoy most about mentoring the next generation?
I love seeing their excitement and when they've reached one of the goals that we've set and they're so happy they've reached it in time or before the timeline we've set.
Mm.
It just makes me so proud of what they're able to accomplish with just a little bit of knowledge coming out
Yeah.
of my brain. I had a mentor years ago, and I won't even say he's a mentor, he was a friend, but he was a giant in our industry. And he was the one that sort of got me on the path of teaching. And his words to me were, Karen, I said, like, why should I teach? I'm just from this little town. I'm not even from a huge metropolitan. What do I have to offer? He goes, you will know more than the person you're going to teach. And so when I see that in someone new coming into the industry, those words resonate again with me. And yeah, it just fills me with joy to see people
Yeah.
succeeding.
Mm. What a great response. Thank you. And on that note, Karen, I just want to say this has been such an amazing conversation on jewelry and gemstones. I mean, I understand jewelry and gemstones as a user or a buyer, but beyond that, I had absolutely no idea. And you took me through some very interesting perspectives on the jewelry business, on coaching, and on appraising and developing other and younger appraisers. Thank you for speaking to me, and good luck to you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to the Brand Called You videocast and podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website www.tbcy.in to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for the brand called You.